VideoGamer podcast. We don't really have an intro on this, so I would just like to ask you to kind of introduce yourself and kind of, how you fell in love with video games, just like right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. That is a great question. So I'm Larry Kuperman. I'm probably better known as Larry Nightdive. My gnome to internet. And I do biz dev for Nightdive Studios. We're a division of Atari, so I guess I should mention that. How I fell in love with video games? Well, that's a fantastic question. So I want to say the year was 1991, may have been 1990, and I played the shareware version of a little game called Wolfenstein 3D. And there came a moment, it's funny. This seems so incredibly naive, but it was world changing at the time. There came a moment when I realized that it was my hand holding the gun in Wolf 3D, and the world changed. The world changed for me.
So that was your first like introduction to video game, was like original Wolfenstein, as in
the original Wolfenstein even predates that one.
Wolfenstein 3D, not like Return to Castle Wolfenstein.
That was that was the Carmack Romero version of it. Yes, so that was the one that changed things for me. I had been exposed to video games before. That was a great. This is my Windows 3.1 computer, which had a 10 megabyte hard drive. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not misspeaking. It was not 10 terabytes. It was 10 megabytes. Absolutely suitable for storing like 4 text documents on. And it had 2 meg of RAM. We lived off of the shareware discs back in those days. Again, I don't think anyone under the age of 40 probably knows what cover mount meant.
Oh, never mind. I was going to say, I'm 27. I know what shareware is. I don't know what cover mount means.
So when you bought, first of all, we ingested our video game news through magazines, that stuff that they used to print on dead trees. But to encourage you to buy the magazine, they had first a floppy disk. Kids, if you're watching this interview, go Google floppy disk. Floppy disk on the cover of it, and then after that, it was replaced by a CD that had the broad headline, contains 50 shareware games. Surely you'll like one of them. So that was how we played games. Before Wolf, I mean, I played the Commander Keen games. I mean, this wasn't an unknown to me, but Wolf was really, oh my God, I didn't realize that it could change it. And I think the quality, and I think the quality that was most appealing to me, very primitive at the time, but would be one that would shape a large measure of my career, was a quality that was immersive. That you felt like you were a character in the game, and that was the first time that I'd had that experience.
Someone who, like I said, I'm, let's say a bit younger. I've played Wolfenstein 3D. I've loved it. One thing that as someone who has grown up in like a different era, is like, I could never get around the fact that at one point Wolfenstein 3D was like one of the most violent games you could see. Like, it was shocking to people how violent it was. I could kind of see like Mortal Kombat, like original Mortal Kombat, where you're like ripping heads off and like dangling spines. But like Wolfenstein 3D specifically is something that I've always struggled to get my head around. So I guess as someone who played it and was like completely immersed in it at that point when it came out, like, was it like shockingly violent to you, or were you like, hell yeah, I've never seen violence like this?
So I was okay with the Nazis dying with "Ach mein Leben." That was I was okay with that. It was shooting the German shepherds.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's really funny. You talk about that being shocking. People objected to that.
Yeah,
that was the content in there. I think the other part was that I think the part was that I'm laughing about the Akhmai Libre, but that the characters that you were your enemies had a human quality to them, that they spoke back to you. I think that upset people also. Did I find the violence objectionable? Oh, hell no. I said, give me more.
Let me kill more Nazis. I think they should have made the dog speak like German phrases, and then you'd be okay with killing it. Real dogs don't speak.
Well, but just think what that would have meant for the development team to get their game to be sold in Germany. So, wait, the green blood was bad enough. The talking dogs, we got to draw the line someplace. So.
I remember, I think growing up, the one video game that made me be like, oh damn, this is really violent would have been Carmageddon 64 on the N64, which I believe also had green blood. I think they had to replace it.
Absolutely, but the advantage was Carmageddon. I first played as a arcade version of it, so you knew what to expect. But yeah, it's funny. All of those standards. I do want to come back and talk a little bit about the immersive quality, because it was that really got it for me. And I can only explain I should say for our audience, for the younger people, and that's pretty much everyone in the world younger than me. I should say for the younger people's benefit, every trite cliche that you have ever heard began as an original statement that was very creative the first time it was said. So things that you kind of assume about being drawn in and feeling that you were the character, that was like new stuff in the 1990s. The next game, and it's funny, it's not one that we remaster. But one of my friends, and who's somebody who helped me with my career, Matt Toshlag, the next game that I played that I had a literal physical response to was Descent.
Oh yeah, I grew up playing the PS1 version of that, and I believe the original PC version of that looks completely different to the PS1 version, as games wanted to do back then. But I just remember seeing 6 degrees of movement for the first time in a 3D environment, and just being like, how are they doing this?
The first time I flew into a room and realized that I was upside down to where I thought I was, my stomach literally flipped. I mean, I literally, felt that, and I don't get motion sick, I don't get car sick, but I had that game, created that reaction. And it's funny because if you fast forward again, that was in the 90s. If you fast forward to 2001, when I took my first job in the video game industry, and I really didn't know how to go about finding a publisher for a video game. But this was when I lived in Michigan, and I knew I had no contacts in the industry, but through walking around my hometown of Ann Arbor, I knew that there was Parallax Studios. So I called Parallax, and I ended up talking to Matt Toshlag over there. And it was Matt that gave me my first clue as to how to go about finding a publisher. And of course Matt and Mike were the team that created Descent.
Well, if we talk about your jump into video games as a career instead of video games as a hobby, you kind of jump into typically on the show we have developers like Seamus Blackley and David Brevik and stuff, but we very rarely get to talk about the sales side of games, which you were on. And in the early 2000s, it was an incredibly different market than it is now. Retail was king. If you're not on the store shelves,
that's right.
You're not anywhere. You're dead. I guess the shareware era is kind of over as well, or maybe the last light. when you start working in sales. So I guess like what was the retail market like for video games in 2001, 2002?
I know a lot of biz dev people in the industry now. I've mentored some of them. Some of them are they're all peers, but some of them are people that have been doing it longer than I am. Until you've had the pleasure of trying to show your game to the completely disinterested buyers for Walmart. I mean, we used to go to these events and we'd pitch our stuff. And before you even got 2 minutes into the presentation, they were kind of shaking their heads. So my first job in the industry was working for Stardock. The first game that we sold to a publisher was during my era. Stardock had existed before, but the first one was The Corporate Machine, which was published in the retail version by Take-Two. And they were great. They were people that got it and that appreciated the game and that worked with us on that. But that being said, yeah, we were able to work directly with publishers. A lot of companies didn't have that option and were out there pitching their indie game, to buyers. It was an awful experience. So one of the tales that I'll tell, and I won't say who it was, but I'm pitching a 4X space exploration game to a buyer, and they're kind of looking at it, and they come back and they say, I really don't like this kind of game. I'm like, okay, where do we go from here? And they say, what game I really like? What's that game that you play in the Windows? And it took me 5 minutes to finally go, you mean Solitaire? And they said yes, and I'm just like, can I get my materials that I gave you back? because there's a big this used to be on old cash registers, no sale sign up there. I'll tell people. So part of the time, part of my career at Startup, we were very early on into electronic distribution, digital distribution. First our software, and then extending it to games. It is unclear in my mind whether we were the ones to first start selling third-party titles or Steam was, but it was pretty much neck and neck, and that's a forgotten part of that era.
There used to be so many marketplaces, like 2005, 2006, like Day Zero. God, I'm trying to think of other ones, but like everyone was trying to get into a piece of the action. The issue was they didn't have Half-Life 2.
well, we had the Gal Civ and later on Sins of a Solar Empire game. So we had our niche there, but we were also doing third-party games, and there's a long story beyond the length of this interview story of how that came about. But the thing that I want to convey to young people is it wasn't just how we sold our games. So retail still exists, but there are things that have become at least somewhat mitigated. If you wanted your game to be on a shelf where it would be visible, as opposed to the bottom shelf where it was just going to get kicked by people looking at the top games, you had to contribute to marketing development funds, MDF, which was essentially blackmail. It was essentially extortion for your titles. It was common throughout the industry. It was kind of you seem to have a nice video game here. It'd be a real problem if nobody ever saw it. One of those things. But it's beyond that. So Steam was out there. Stardock followed with what became known, it was originally Drengen, but became known as Impulse, and then became the GameStop application. So we were a competitor with Steam. Then Epic wasn't around. GOG was up and coming.
When does GOG come around? Is that 2010 maybe? 2009?
I think so. I was going to say 2008. It may have been. I mean, they didn't really burst on the scene. It was known by people that were really, but retro wasn't as big as it is now. And much respect to the team over at GOG. We've partnered with them on many things, and we certainly are both in the preservation area. But the thing that I try to explain to people, and I want to tie this back to demoing your game in front of unimpressed buyers, is that unusual games would never have seen the light of day. Mm-hmm. And that includes, I mean, if you look at our history about what's been hot and selling in this decade, there's a non-zero chance that somebody would have looked at Balatro and said, no, we're not interested in card games. Certainly the cozy games.
Well, maybe that Solitaire guy, maybe he would have taken a big bargain on Balatro.
Absolutely. Games like Stardew Valley would probably never have seen the light of day. I mean, innovative games. Not to mention that today there's so many great quirky games. Schedule One. I can tell you that Schedule One would have died because that was the don't do drugs era.
We can't sell a drug game. What are you smoking?
Right. So I mean, that's something that people don't really understand. And the other part to that is that it was a lot harder to be an indie back then. You might be developing your game with a small team, maybe doing it yourself, but you knew no one was going to see it. That you were going to sell 3 copies to your mom, your uncle, and your cousin, and that no matter how hard you worked, it wasn't that there wasn't a market. There was a market for those games. There wasn't a marketplace for those games.
Yeah. So when you're like shipping games to, when you're selling games to like retailers and stuff, I think like the big indie hit at the time around 2005 is Cave Story, which had no marketplace, right? It had to release for free. Like there was no place to sell it until like the Wii came out and it had the Wii shop.
And you look at what John Romero and the team did about releasing, Doom and following that shareware model, how innovative that was, and how it changed things. I use a musical quotation to explain things. There was a quote that I've seen attributed to a number of people, including Brian Eno, that for the Ramones' first album, only 600 people bought it, but everyone started a band. And I've heard the names and the faces changed, but the quote about 600 people and everyone started a band is really accurate. When that kind of thing happened, there were a lot of people in the industry that said, I could do that. Today it's a true issue in the video game industry of how do you have discovery. Well, back then discovery wasn't so hard because there were only 12 games going to come out that year. And 3 of them were from EA. So
I mean, even on the journalist side, it's like, you got to play so many games. Like there's so many games that are releasing right now. Like I can't even think of a time in my life where like I've struggled to like finish one game because of how many are coming out. But there's like 3 games every day that are like good, not that they're like just slop that it also gets released on like marketplaces.
So with that said, I mean there's certainly a market for games. For us at Nightdive, and as part of Atari. I mean, it's true for Atari itself, and our sister company, Digital Eclipse. We're no longer in the position of having to spell the names of our studios and explain why we want to take old games rather than classic IP. We didn't say. I think I invented classic IP. That phrase somewhere along the way. But that's an enormous change, and part of that happened during my experience. So again, let me back up. We saw that the old model in the early 2000s. I'm at startup. We saw the old model of selling games only on retail was not working for us, because a fair amount of the time publishers went bankrupt and said, "We've got your money, but we're not giving it to you." So that was a real concern at that time. We had offered our software, now our games, digitally. Now to build out that platform where we're working with other companies and offering their games as well. And part of that was because my pitch to them was, I've worked with the same publishers that you have, the same retail agents that you have. I'm going to pay you every time your game gets sold. and that was kind of innovative. I think part of it was building trust, but then I think they were actually surprised when we started paying them on a monthly basis. It wasn't, and people don't realize how complex the retail business is, that you're dealing with sell in and sell through, and then returns, and it's a very different business than.
I think I've heard from others that it was likely, if you were going to get paid, that it would be every 3 months instead of on a monthly basis. Is that true?
Yes. So it was quarterly, and there were reasons behind that, because you had to wait for the stores to close their books at the end of the month, and then they would report it to the publisher. The publisher needed time to go over those numbers. So by that time, you're now looking at 90 days out. But again, it was even more complicated than that, because you got paid on what you sold into the stores. But when all of those copies didn't sell, they returned them, and now you're dealing very complex area. And again, it's not like today where things come out digitally and then there's either a simultaneous retail version or sometime after the fact comes the retail version. Nightdive prefers to do it after the fact because we can bug patch digitally, basically in real time. And so that when we commit to the retail version, it has as many fixes as we could do. Fans are always impatient on that, but if it helps, I don't think they're going to be less impatient, but at least you have a reason why
I think there's a precedent that that physical release comes out from Nightdive and it comes out in a good state, instead of being something that you're going to have to connect to the internet because there was a minor oversight that's proven to be a pain in the ass.
I remember back in the old days, a company that I worked with got the lowest review ever because the copy of the game that they sent to a reviewer on media would actually not install. Even I, with all my sales acumen, couldn't position that one as being a feature. Think of it as a time saver. You have the disc and it'll never wear out. Congratulations.
It's a collector's item.
You now have another coaster for your home. But that change, that change made things really possible. And as we were building out these digital platforms, content was king. So I was not only looking for the newest games, but I was going back to companies and saying, what do you have from back catalog? The first game whose remaster I was involved with predates my time at Nightdive by I think 3 years. It was Total Annihilation.
Oh, okay.
That we brought back when I was at Stardock. The source code had been lost. We had to reverse engineer that game, but we were able to do so and come up with a version that was working on modern operating systems, and that started that off.
And I believe it's still available today. That version
wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. So it was then Impulse. It went from Impulse after our period of exclusivity came out. It went over to GOG. But here's the ironic part. I mean, you might get a kick out of this, and it'll come back to one of my game industry aphorisms. So I was at Stardock at the time. Was running the Impulse platform. I had to negotiate with the rights holder. Chris Taylor was the dev on that, but the rights holder at that time was a company that would become an integral part of my future, Atari. A very different Atari than the one.
Yeah, which Atari was that? Was that Atari 2 or 4 or 5?
I think it may have been Atari 3.1. But no, Atari got it, and we were able to do that. After that, as we began to expand, I mean, there was clearly a market for these titles that were not playable without some TLC. And I remember going back to, I was working with Activision at the time, and my counterpart at Activision said, "What do you want, with these old games?" And I laughed and said, "I don't call them old. I call them classic." And she said to me, "Good. I'm not old. I'm just classic."
It's always seemed weird to me as just like a consumer of games that it took so long for it to become kind of commonplace for companies to go, let's look at our back catalog and find just a way of getting it out there so that people can just give us money again.
I can't tell you, so anytime Nightdive does a news announcement, anytime we do say anything, if you read the comments on any social media, whether it's X or Blue Sky or Instagram, wherever, you will see a whole bunch of people shouting out the next ones that they want us to do.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of times you've seen No One Lives Forever or No One Lives Forever 2 in those comments. It must be it must just be something that you are automatically blanking out at that point.
I flinch. But that said, I just want to say this defense. I mean, we feel as enthusiastic. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for love. But you don't realize that not only did people not look at the fact that this could generate revenue for them, that these old titles could be made new and could be revenue generators again. They hadn't kept any of the source code. Sometimes they hadn't kept the records. We run into issues where there isn't a consecutive series of contracts, and that becomes problematic.
Well, Nightdive's first re-release, the System Shock 2 re-release, is kind of based off that, right? Stephen Kick, who you work with, couldn't bind System Shock 2 anywhere, despite it being one of the most beloved PC games at the time, and trying to work out who owned those rights and kind of just bring it back in a basic form. And now you guys have remastered it significantly later.
Stephen had been lucky enough to find someone that was willing to take his call at the insurance company that had the rights. And this is also just, either perseverance or dumb luck, however you want to call it. But when he contacted the insurance company, they were facing a potential loss of trademark because you have to prove commercial usage of the trademark. You can't just squat on it forever. You have to do it. And so he calls them up and says, "I want to do a commercial project for you," at the moment that they are looking for someone to do a commercial project with. So that worked out. But again, I mean, we were fortunate. Steve did a tremendous amount of detective work to get to that point. There were videos that everything was lost. The other part that comes in is when you have contracts, and this is going back literally decades. The question that comes up is, as I said, the consecutive a chain of ownership. If there's a lapse in those, if you have a contract from 2001 and then something from 2009, you don't know if there were things that were done in the middle, and what those might have said. So there's a lot of complexity to it.
So if we take something that I believe should have been, at least from my outsider view, something that seems like it would have been less technically, let's just say, fucky, for lack of a better term. Star Wars Dark Forces, LucasArts, part of Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm gets bought by Disney. That's there. Am I correct in that? And then you guys have partnered with Disney and you've brought back Dark Forces.
That's correct, but there is minutiae that goes even beyond that. Someone did the music for those games. Are the musical rights accompany the game rights? In other words, did the company that made the game purchase essentially the music? Was it done under a work for hire agreement where your work is now belongs to us?
Or was it the composer owns the tracks that they've made?
Or was it we're getting the right to use your music for a period of 3 years, and 20 years later, when somebody goes to remaster the game, they now have that challenge. How about video games that featured real people in them?
Yeah, like FMVs, Killing Time, right? Full of FMV like cutscenes and like enemies or FMVs.
So tracking down the rights is a non-trivial. When I tell people that I'm biz dev and that I get the so all you do is stay home and play video games, and I always say, sure, that's 90% of my job, but the other 10% is real work.
How much time would you say you spend like on the phone trying to figure out who owns what?
Well, I don't think we have phones anymore. I do. I'm still a telephone person, but I spend a fair amount of time in negotiations, both before and after the acquisition of the game. So not only am I the one that is the go-between between our lawyers and their lawyers. I mean, usually it's their biz dev person and their lawyer, me and my lawyer having these conversations. But even after that, I'm the one that is responsible for making sure that they get their payments, their reports, to deal with any issues of the game. Frequently I get a game that has sold tens of thousands of copies, but somebody reported to the client that they can't play it on their number 9 video card. You're too young to know what a number 9 video card was, but on their ancient, this doesn't run under Windows 3.1, kind of thing. I mean, those things happen fairly frequently. Less so now than when we released Turok in 2015. One of the issues that came up was, would it play on the average business laptop? Why was that an issue? Well, it wasn't an issue for the fans so much, but for the people that owned the IP, that had the standard laptop that you give business executives. Would it run? The answer was yes. Would it run well?
Well, I mean, I played your Turok remaster on like a pretty shitty laptop at the time. And I was like, well, it's better than the N64 version in every single way.
That's fortunately for us, the bar is set low on that. But yes, that's the idea. And the laptop that you had in 2015 is was underpowered for the time, but incredibly underpowered for today's modern, Intel, AMD, laptop processors. They all do a far
Yeah, I
better
think it
job.
had a Core 2 Duo or something in 2015. Like I don't even know if you could run I don't. Well, you definitely can't run Windows 11 on it.
I mean, those were the challenges. I will say, just in general, I understand why the console gaming audience is a lot larger than the PC gaming audience these days. Even though I am still and probably will be till the end of my days a PC gamer, but I get the it just works aspect of things. So.
Well, I think you said there was something that you said in the past. It was about how like the console audience for Nightdive specifically, like there's kind of a fervor of getting those games because they've never experienced a lot of these games before. And it's also, like you said, it's so simple that to preserve a game on console, you just put it on that console. Whereas on PC, maybe someone's going to grab like an old version and like install like 56 different plugins that may or may not work and get it into a playable state if they really want to.
Well, we try to support those. We try to support. We have an interesting relationship with the modding community because
your Kex engine is based on like an open source modding tool, right?
Well, our Kex engine makes use of some open source elements. It is proprietary and developed by Samuel Kaiser Villarreal. That's his brainchild, and it is not open source, but there are open source libraries that we make use of. That being said, one of our mantras is that you should be able to play any game you want, however you want. If you want to play on your Switch, if you want to play on your PlayStation, the game should be accessible to you. We have never done exclusive deals, even though they were out there. It's just not. It's not the. I wouldn't like it if somebody told me. So just that simple. I want to be able to play the game on Steam. I want to be able to get a DRM free copy from GOG. I want to grab it on the Epic Store. I want to play it on my PlayStation. That we supported. We supported Stadia till the dying breath. So, that's just something that's important to us. And some of the games. There have been very few controversies around Nightdive. I tell people that we've become the boring company. And
when you said that, I think there's only one that I could think of, and that was that System Shock remake, not the remaster, ended development and restarted development. And there were some people who were not quite so happy with that. But apart from that,
I was the one that was responsible for the original blast, saying that we had put the game on a hiatus, and I swear you can stack of Bibles, Torah and the Koran. I'll put my hand there. I thought everyone knew what the word hiatus meant, but there we go.
Also, kudos for keeping that original demo available to download, like the Unity demo. I believe it's like still in my GOG library. Which I played that when it came out, absolutely fell in love with it, and then the new the version that finally came out, very different, but also just as amazing. Well, actually, let's say better than the other one.
Let me tell you the slippery slope that haunts all game developers. We are, by definition, creative people. It is very difficult to work on a game and not feel the desire to put your signature on it somehow, to do that. Now Nightdive, we have a clear vision. We've always said we want our remakes, our remasters to play the way you remembered them playing. It may be, as in the case of the System Shock remake, a completely new game, but we wanted to evoke the same sensibilities that you had playing the original back then, except now you're playing in on widescreen with the graphics are gorgeous, and but you have that the experience remains the same. That's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And we do fix things sometimes. We're very fortunate that we get to work with many of the original developers. That's another part of the Nightdive secret sauce. So, for example, in the game Shadow Man, we knew that there were levels that had not been completed.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked with the developers and we asked them about it. And Sam, who's the mastermind behind the Kex engine, is also one heck of a level designer. And he was able to complete those levels that were cut from the game, not by an artistic choice, but because they ran out of budget and time. So it wasn't that we were changing the vision, we were completing the vision of the original developers.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, like, this is actually one of the questions that I had, because the Thing remastered that I believe released last year, that is kind of like it's like you said, it's as you remember it, but it is actually quite drastically different because you guys went in, you redid a lot of the art, and like it looks like you remember it would have, but also like there's way more like props than the way like the light hits things. It's like, oh yeah, why wasn't that there in the original? But also like the AI is improved. There's like cut mechanics that are now part of the game, and because of that, level design has to be kind of drastically redone because otherwise those mechanics don't really play together. And it's kind of like, where do you set that limit between like and can you call that remaster? Can you call that reimagined? Is it something in between?
We see it as a remaster, but let me answer that question. We were fortunate enough to have two members of the original Computer Artworks team working with us hand in glove for perhaps as much of a year. This was not a trivial, one time give us a shout. So again, it was a case of not changing the vision, but fulfilling the vision of the team. And we would not have been able to make the same game without those efforts. But that's not always possible. I mean, the other thing was we had a complete library of the source code. We had the original graphics that were much higher res than what were in the original game because the hardware couldn't support it. So it was a perfect confluence of those things. That's not always possible.
Mm.
And something that we've started doing lately is we like to call them restorations. It's neither a remaster nor a remake. So we do not have the source code. We don't have that, but we can work with a partner to do essentially an emulated version of it that will play on modern consoles. And we've done that with a classic game, part of one of the first titles that I worked on when I got to Nightdive, Harlan Ellison's "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream." Mm-hmm. So that is now available for the first time to console players. That's not the only one. We did that with Blade Runner, mm-hmm. and people took exception, I think, to Blade Runner and the PC version. That they look, we didn't tell you not to play the original. In fact, I think we in some cases we bundled it. That wasn't the issue, but
yeah, Blade Runner, there's a button that you press and it's right back to the original.
But people don't realize that without the work that we did on it, Xbox and PlayStation, console fans would just never have had the opportunity to play the game. And so we're looking to do more of those. Again, we see it as kind of the 3 R's. If we have the budget, the team, and the rights to it, we can do a complete remake of a game. Sometimes that's not warranted. Sometimes people just want a version that they can have now that is the original version that will play for them on their modern hardware. And in those cases, we can do a remaster. But in other cases, we just don't have the resources, and by the resources I mean the source code. Typically, we don't have the ability to do a fuller version of it. So we're looking at doing restorations on those. And one thing I do need to emphasize to our audience: just because we do a remaster of a title or a restoration of a title does not mean that there won't be a fuller version coming out later. But this is what we have now.
Well, System Shock's an example of that, right? Like one of the first Nightdive game is bringing System Shock just as it was to modern platform, to PC specifically.
Let's take a look at the journey of System Shock 2. So we started off with we've got the rights to the original version, and we can make it playable. Then we began to look at some of the mods that were out there that made the experience much more enjoyable.
Made co-op work, I believe, was one that was well kind of.
to start with, even more basic than that, mouse look.
Yeah.
Right. So we put out the enhanced edition of those games, and those are still around. People can experience them. Even when we have a new version out, our usual path on that is to either leave the original up or to merge it in with, so you buy the new version and you get the old version as well. We try to do that because we really are about restoration and preservation. But that you do what you can with that, and again, there can be contractual reasons. There can be lack of code, or simply a lack of a bandwidth for us. Sometimes we have to choose between, we can get a game out now and let people play it, or tell you to wait 2 to 3 years, 4 years for us to remaster it. Well, we go with option A.
Well, if we take like one project as an example, like I think one of my favorite releases that you guys have done is, we talked about it was the Dark Forces remaster. And I think that's a game where, like, it's not actually the game I remember. It's weirdly a game like where, like, I am very astutely aware of how crunchy that original version is and how much of an improvement like the new version of the game is, like with the new cutscenes, the beautifully upscale graphics and like the remastered music. And being able to just play that on whatever platform I want is such like an amazing experience as someone who, like, before you guys remastered it, I had to like dig out my PS Vita that I had the PS1 version of the game on. And I guess when it comes to that project specifically, like, that feels like a project where you had enough time, enough budget to really go in and like shape it up the way that it deserved to be.
All right. So the first time that you played the new version of it, how long did you spend looking up, because you couldn't do that in the original? Right.
I
what
actually,
if that's a feature?
I got the review code when it came out, and I think I must have looked up by accident or something, and I had to dig out my Vita, the old version, and it'd be like, I didn't think I could do that.
You couldn't. So yes, that was a true labor of love. And the other thing that I'm going to say in there, I really haven't talked very much about our partners, but Disney and Lucas could not have been a better partner to work with. At one point in the game, and I'm glad you mentioned it. We up-resed all the graphics, the cutscenes in particular. Shout out to Brenna on my team. Those were redone frame by frame by human beings. Well, human beings, if you believe that developers fall under that. Just kidding, guys. Don't flame me for that. But they were a great partner. But there was one point in it where the star field was really not up to spec, and they gave us the one that they had developed for, I think, Mandalorian, and said, "Here, you have better stars." So I mean, but they were absolutely great to work with, a great partner, and challenging at times. but everything, all of their input absolutely made the game better.
Yeah, it feels like a labor of love that you can only get with a company that like has kept every single asset they've ever made for like the past 40 years.
One thing I'd like to call out that I think is a major differentiator of Nightdive titles now. It started by request from our partners over at Bethesda, that beginning with Quake, we included a vault with the game, and in the vault you will see concept drawings, you will see designs from the original developers. As much content as we can, levels that were not complete, that were designed for an E3, but we've now completed and are now playable with the game. I mean, we put as much in there as we can, and it's not just, it is to add value to the game, but it is also to keep alive the work that was done by the original development team.
Do you ever see like a remaster of something come out and be like, oh, I wish we had our hands on that? Because like the way that you guys treat remasters, like you specifically saying like bringing back E3 demos and concept art. Obviously, like Halo 2 was remastered in 2014 for its 10th anniversary, and recently like modders came out and they brought back like that E3 demo, and I'm just like, well, if Nightdive had this game like 10 years ago, I would have had that E3 demo already.
Yes, there is an aspect to this. I will let you know that my original, when I was in college, I studied theater, and there's an old acting joke. How many actors does it take to change a light bulb? 7, 1 to actually change the bulb, and 6 to stand around the base of the ladder going, that could have been me up there. Yes, there isn't a remaster that comes out. We live in a great time of that, but there isn't a remaster that comes out that some part of me doesn't look at and say, I would have done it different. I would have done it differently. And if I ever stop feeling that way, it's probably time for me to retire.
It's time for a nap. There's a statement from the Software Preservation Network about how 87% of games are critically endangered, like their source codes are lost, like you've said. They're just like lost to the ether of legal issues. Ability, like for a long time, people thought GoldenEye was one of them. It would never come back. Thankfully, they sorted that out for a little bit. And I mean, maybe this is like, not nice to say, but like, do you ever feel like you are barely making a dent in like that 87% figure of how many games are out there that like you guys could touch, but there's just not enough time?
No, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this is part of my life philosophy, not just my game development thing. It is better to light one candle than to curse the darkness 1,000 times. Just on that basis, I'm very proud of what I've done, the contributions. I'm very proud that other companies have seen the work that Nightdive has done and said we can do that also. So again, that's that Brian Eno comment on there. I feel that there has been our work itself, but then there's been our influence. The other thing that I want to mention is that Nightdive takes a different perspective. We have a perspective that I think is unique with us, which is, while we'll all agree with this, we put it into action. If we can all agree that video games are art, I think that issue was settled 30 years ago. Then by definition, the people that make them are artists, and we not only try to preserve the legacy of our video games, we also try to preserve the thoughts and emotions of the people that made those games, of things that I'm proudest of, that I have been able to contribute to. Our interviews with Ken Levine just came out. We've interviewed Paul Neurath and the great Warren Spector. There are other interviews at QuakeCon last year. I sat down with my friend and someone that I work closely with, Kevin Cloud. So that is being preserved as well. That said, I also recognize you can't fix everything. In life or video games, you just can't fix everything, but you fix what you can.
And it is true that you guys have like you've lit a torch, and other people have like seen that light and they're lighting their own torches. Like I feel like we're getting more quality remasters than we've ever got before, and it was only just before like Nightdive started that I guess like we saw like some really heinous like quote unquote remasters on like the Xbox 360 and PS3. I believe like Devil May Cry HD collection on PS3 or Silent Hill HD collection with Comic Sans beta fonts and weirdly re-recorded audio.
I won't comment on the work of other studios, except to say this, that I truly believe that almost all developers really try to do their best work. Yeah, there are some cash grabs. There always were. I think it's less prevalent in our industry than in other industries. But I will say this. You can try to do something as hard as you can that does not necessarily guarantee success. And when you look at some of those heinous remakes, I'll just say somebody probably thought it was a good idea.
Well, I got one final thing to say. I've written down my Nightdive hit list because you said that you said that people always tell you what they want you to remaster. All right, I've got Shogo Mobile Armor Division.
One of my favorites, also. Yes.
I believe that's a Monolith game, right? So
yes, it is.
Who knows where the rights are? I imagine Warner Bros. Soldier of Fortune. I'm not sure how well it's aged, but me and my boss, when we were thinking of games to put on this list, we were both like, yeah, that one. Gore everywhere.
We did take a stab at it. I don't recall why, but there were at least some contractual issues, some rights issues around that. Go ahead.
Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, which I believe is now on GOG, but I don't believe it's had the Nightdive treatment, which would be the best. AVP and AVP2. Sorry, specifically AVP Gold and AVP2. And then because I'm an Alien nut, Alien Trilogy and or Alien Resurrection, the Argonaut game. That's my entire list. I was going to put No One Lives Forever on there, but I think you did that enough.
I was going to say the list wouldn't be complete without Nulf on it. All good titles. The only thing that I will say in this, so first of all, it is our policy. We don't announce games that are in development until they're ready to be announced. The only thing that I will say is that our goal at Nightdive and through Atari for the Nightdive sector is to release 4 to 5 games per year, which, given the size of our studio and given the quality levels that we insist on, it's an ambitious target. Those are major releases. That does not include things like the Turok being ported to a native build for PS5, or Switch 2 versions of our titles. I'm talking about new IP. So all I can tell you is that more things are coming from Nightdive.
And I think it's worth saying that like the Nightdive bar of quality. I mean, now that Switch 2 is out, obviously you have a lot more power to work with. But I mean, some of my favorite ways to play your remasters have been on the original Switch, which is incredibly underpowered. Was underpowered the day it came out, but like the labor of love that you put into every single platform means that like no matter where it is, they really do shine and sing. So thank you for like bringing back some of my favorite games in like just amazing ways.
I couldn't think of a better wrap up for this interview. So thank you for the time and for the opportunity to speak.
Well, thank you for all the work that you guys have done at Nightdive, because it's been incredible.